It's finally here. It's here. The beginning of our rewatch / dissection of Fate the Winx Saga. Now, just to iterate, I am no longer referring to Fate as a live adaptation of the Winx Club, because after watching it through several times, it's very clear that it's not an adaptation. It's more of a live action reimagination of the original Winx series. I will try my best to compare and contrast it to the original source material, but I know I'll forget things, and so if I do leave something out that you'd like for me to go over, just hit me up on socials, on Instagram and Twitter, and we can discuss it. But without further ado, let's dive in. And again, just so it's said, this does contain spoilers, so here we go. Hey there, welcome to the Winx Forever Podcast. I'm Lola, creator, host, and lifelong Winx fan. I'm taking a deep dive into the very cool universe of Winx Club. So whether you've been a Winx fan since 2004 like myself, or you vaguely remember the show from your childhood, or you're being introduced to it for the first time, welcome. This is the Winx Forever Podcast. Fate the Winx Saga, Season 1, Episode 1. To the Waters and the Wild. The description of the first episode on Netflix reads, "In hopes of mastering her magic, Bloom begins her studies at Althea and crosses paths with her curious classmates. Meanwhile, a secret comes to light. Ooh." You guys, we literally, like, the opening is literally, the first words is effing sheep. Are you kidding me? Literally, that's the first words in the whole series. Like, nothing tells us that this is not a children's show, like the first words being effing sheep from that little, like, sheep farmer guy. What are they called? Shepherds. Alright, so Bloom arrives at Althea. The next scene takes us through this little mini montage of, like, the fairies and specialists arriving at Althea and for, like, the new school year. And we pan down and reveal Bloom taking it all in as she passes her soon-to-be Winx sweetmates. We see Tara being loaded down with a tray full of plants to adorn her new sweets common area, no doubt. Aisha then walks by, looking slightly intimidated, but determined nonetheless. She passes by Stella, who is taking pictures, probably with first years, that couldn't resist asking for a magic-lit selfie with the Princess of Celeria herself. We then see Musa, who is, of course, listening to music. All of this is a little bit of foreshadowing to their characters, which was, kind of cute and, basic. So Bloom keeps fidgeting with her phone, an iPhone presumably, that apparently works in the other world. She receives a notification that appears on the screen that shows she needs to meet Stella at the gates. So in Fate, it's just, it really seems to have wanted to use social media as a way to help progress the story along. Bringing elements onto the screen to show the what the characters are seeing on their device. It's a little bit similar to, just a little bit similar to the Broadway musical Dear Evan Hansen, though it's not quite the same, as social media is only helping elements of the character and not a character itself. I suppose it's trying to be relevant and topical, bringing the show into 2021, teenagers consumed by social media. Ooh, however, it is interesting that they didn't take a Harry Potter approach to this, and since they are in a magical universe with advanced magical capabilities, they wouldn't need mere Muggle electronics, in the Harry Potter books, they refer to Muggle inventions as their way of making up for the fact that they don't use magic. So the fact that it just feels so out of place. And it's really one of the main quarrels I have with the setup of this show is the technology. It hurts. Bloom, of course, catches the eye of Sky of Heraklion, and all of the Skloom fans just rejoiced. Though they never actually really, introduced themselves in the interaction to follow. Sky just kind of leaves the guy that he was talking to mid-conversation to go chase after Bloom. Rude. Bloom, shrugs off Sky's attempts to, flirt, I guess. And establishes that she's a strong, independent fairy that doesn't need no specialist. Snap. But Bloom starts to, make some really broad assumptions and just automatically accuses Sky of mansplaining. I guess to further indicate that she is a strong female lead, I suppose. But I have a problem with the dialogue in this scene. It just seems very forced. We get it. Girl power. Cool. But I feel like that's a very odd use of the word mansplain. Mansplaining is usually when a man starts to explain something to a woman that a woman already knows, but he is trying to belittle her. I don't know. I think it was a very odd choice of words, and they're trying to over-establish the girl power essence of the show, which comes naturally. It doesn't have to be forced. So Brian Young, take notes. So in true Riven fashion, Riven comes and interrupts Sky's and Bloom's conversation, which is how perfect of a first line we get from Riven is stop perving on the first years. Classic Riven. So Bloom finally meets up with Stella thanks to Riven's distraction with Sky. And Stella leads Bloom through the halls of Althea, and she's all wide-eyed and taking it all in, and she leads Bloom to Dowling's office. As I mentioned in the last episode, in the original Winx series, Stella is the one to find Bloom on Earth. Or rather, I guess Bloom finds Stella on Earth fighting an ogre and some ghouls in the park, and that's when Bloom discovers her powers in the original. In Fate, however, Farrah Dowling, Althea's headmistress, is the one to find Bloom on Earth 3 months after Bloom started a house fire and burned her mom, resulting in Bloom feeling such shame and fear that it would happen again that she decided to start sleeping in a warehouse. Okay. And that's where Farrah finds her and invites her to come to Althea. So Bloom tells Stella how she got to the other world through a gateway that Dowling directed her to use. We don't learn a whole lot about the other world in the series except for there are 7 realms and each one's a different kind of boring, at least according to Stella. Apparently realms are continents or countries in the other world, like the realm of Solaria, Heraklion, Lymphea, etc. In the Winx series, Althea was originally in the realm of magics. And Solaria, Lymphea, Heraklion were completely different planets entirely. In Farrah Dowling's office, Bloom examines an enchanted globe of the other world as Dowling explains Althea's first-year curriculum. So this globe was the first piece of content that gave us a glimpse into the geography of the other world on Fate's official Instagram account leading up to the series release. Since the overall series doesn't really do much more world building than Stella's passing comment about the 7 realms and the one shot of the enchanted globe, the official Instagram account did release some follow-up content explaining kind of the other world of Fate a little more in depth and possibly alluding to what's to come in season 2 maybe. For example, Heraklion appears to be now a realm known for its fierce warrior culture, whereas Lymphea is a natural, lush world dense with jungles and rich, diverse animals and plant life. And apparently, spoiler, rumors to have powerful lost treasures and relics. So cool. So knowing this was probably going to be the case of the first season of Fate, where they were only allotted 6 episodes to really set the scene for the series, I preemptively pre-ordered the young adult novelization of Fate in hopes that it would give me, like a little more detail about the world and the characters itself. Yeah, it does like none of that. At least it does less of that and more of just recalling every scene in Fate shot for shot. Now, I'm not finished with the book yet, so I will do a full review on it once I am finished, but let's just say so far it hasn't been worth the $12 or whatever the heck it costs. So Bloom isn't exactly thrilled at what Dowling had to say about the slow learning process for the first years. In the book, it shares that Bloom was assuming that her time at Alfea would be short and sweet, learn to control her powers and then, get the heck out. I'm willing to bet that Dowling had a pretty good idea of who Bloom might be at this point. I mean, she tells Bloom about all these wonderful things that Alfea graduates have accomplished, and all Bloom is interested in is control over her powers, but Dowling definitely knows that she can do much, much more. For the next sequence of scenes, we get introduced to the members of the Winx Suite, which is the name of the dormitory that the girls all share, though we don't know this is the name of the dormitory the girls all share just yet in this point. Anyway. Bloom is seen video chatting her parents, who apparently freaking have 11G or something to be able to connect wirelessly to the other world. But again, I digress. Vanessa, Bloom's mom, alludes to the fact that she has a hard time making friends, and then Bloom makes a Lord of the Flies reference, and then her dad refers to it as Lady of the Flies and to not be sexist, which if anything, that correction was, probably a little sexist, but like I said, some of this dialogue is kind of painful, but honestly, it wouldn't be a Winx franchise series if it didn't have cringe dialogue here and there, in my opinion, so it's I mean, that's pretty on par. So Aisha overhears their conversation and realizes that Bloom got very nervous when they started asking her questions about the school. When Bloom ends the call with her parents, she explains that they don't know that she's a fairy because they're not fairies, they're human, and that Dowling said Bloom comes from a long dormant fairy bloodline. I wonder if Aisha started to put together at that point that Bloom was a changeling even here. Because as she walks away, Aisha gives her this rather curious look, So in the original series, Bloom has a roommate named Flora. She is the fairy of nature. During Tara and Musa's introductions in Fate, we learn that Tara is actually cousin to Flora, who we are all waiting with bated breath to see in season 2. Maybe it's a trip to Lynthea to figure out how to bring back Miss Dowling. Yike, was that too much of a spoiler in the first episode deep dive? Is that too much? Okay, I'll stop. So similar to the original Winx series, Stella has a room to herself and is the only second year in a dormitory full of first years, which Musa points out almost immediately. In the original Winx, Stella was held back a year due to using an unauthorized spell and consequently destroying the potions laboratory in the process, at least according to the 4Kids dub. Now, it's never really addressed why Stella is specifically in the Winx Suite in Fate. However, we can make some pretty good guesses because of the information we learn later on in the season. Funny enough, Aisha also had a room to herself in the original Winx series, which led me to believe it was because she and Stella were both royalty in the Winx series. However, this isn't the case in Fate. It seems that they've chosen to revoke Aisha's title of Princess of Andros and make her this do-gooder, know-it-all, which varies a lot from the original Winx. tough as nails, headstrong, do-it-yourself, love of bike riding Aisha we know and love. We also get to see Tara busy making the Winx suite feel welcoming and lively, much like herself, with placing plants all over the apartment. This very much reminded me of how Flora's plants were scattered throughout the dormitory in season 1, and making it hard on Stella and Tekna, particularly. It was cool to see that this, like, too much gene characteristic also carried over into Tara's character as well. Transition to the specialists' training facilities. Okay, for real. Dane said exactly what I was thinking when Silva was giving his little, like, speech to the first years. First off, like, Silva, chill, bro. Second, I don't necessarily want to sit here and, like, constantly compare Fate to the original Winx series, but I do feel like the specialists got a significant downgrade in their roles in this reimagined universe. The original Winx specialists went on missions to transport dangerous creatures that they also helped track and capture. Not to mention they were trained in, like, flying magical aircrafts and trained to ride and train dragons. Like, what? In Fate, however, they're literally just a military school? Gross. I do wish they had done more with the layout of the specialist facilities. This part of the set seemed kind of like an afterthought to me. They did such a good job on the rest of the set that they were like, oh crap, we need a place for the boys to hit each other. Let's get some pipe and drape and make a makeshift stage platform thing and set up some IKEA benches. It'll be fine. I think that just more thought could have gone into this space is all. Silva then goes on this whole rant about, like, why the barrier exists, which I have a lot of questions about why the barrier, like, are there burned ones just around the specific area where Althea is, and that's why there's just one barrier around Althea? Like, are there burned ones scattered throughout Solaria? And it's just, like, what is happening? What is going on in this world? That there's just one barrier around the school and not the, I don't get it. So literally, as Silva is, like, explaining, like, don't pass across the barrier, don't go near the barrier, don't go outside of the barrier. Okay, while he's doing that, in true Riven fashion, what is he doing? Going outside of the barrier, and that's when he discovers the effing sheep guy dead and, like, mangled, and, like, yeah. So then, like, literally all of the faculty, all of the school faculty come and, like, examine this dead body, and then, like, Tara's dad, like, scoops up a bunch of stuff on his knife and puts it on his rag and, like, carries it around the school just in his hand, just willy-nilly. There's a lot there. There's a lot. Anyway, next scene. As a custom to Althea tradition, obviously there has to be an orientation party. Man, poor Tara. She just wants to be friends with everybody so bad, and they're so awful to her. They also did the literally the one thing that I hoped that they wouldn't do with Tara's character. And that was making her body image a key part of her character arc. And I can't with it. I'm all about bringing body diversity to the franchise. Like, yes, please, let's do that. But let's not make it the only thing she's known for in the series. Like, I wanted Tara to be a confident big girl that didn't care what people thought. Like, I know. You can't have it all. You can't win them all, right? I know. But, yikes. Also, can I just point out that Bloom and Aisha in Fate make really good roommates. They both would rather not be at a large gathering with people and off doing their own thing because they both sneak away and leave the party almost immediately after they both get there. Like, classic. All right, so Sky and Stella. I will say, I did kind of see this coming. I was hoping against hope it wasn't going to be true, but yeah, Stella and Sky apparently dated the year prior, and due to reasons we find out later, they broke up before the summer, and apparently Stella is now a second-year mentor in a dorm full of first years, which I have some theories on. So either Stella was held back in the series Fate due to her struggles with magic and incident with her previous roommate, or Feyre really did pick her to be Bloom's mentor. It would kind of make sense if Sky was also told to keep a close eye on Bloom, which, like, OMG. Like, I just realized, like, that's probably the reason why Sky, like, singled out Bloom when she first arrived. Unless, like, Sky wasn't given, like, Bloom as an assignment until after her little field trip to Asterdale with Beatrix. But, like, either way, it's interesting to think about. So pairing Sky up with Stella was definitely one I saw coming. Though after learning that Sky was no longer the Prince of Heraklion like he was in the original series, it made even less sense why they would pair these two together than just to make a confusing love triangle between him, Bloom, and Stella. I mean, in the end, Skloom fans get what they all want, but, like, yikes. I will say that, like, Sky and Stella's relationship does kind of start to make sense, you know, later on in the series, but still, yikes. Yo, speaking of an odd pairing, Tara and Riven, right? So weird that they would give them a personal relationship. Like, I mean, just the fact that these characters have any ties at all was such an interesting choice. I do like her and Dane's character together, though not as much as when Dane starts to get mixed up with Riven and Beatrix. That's just all so messy. So during the party scene, we also get introduced to Beatrix for the first time, and I have a lot of thoughts on Beatrix, and most of them might be kind of, like, unpopular. I don't know, we'll see. So when she just strolls up to Dowling's office and knocks on the door, and, like, Callum is just like, WTF is this girl doing here? Like, and she tells him to fetch him a water that's room temperature. Who takes water room temperature? Like, y'all already know she's a psycho. She drinks room temp water. What the freak? Also, Riven makes fun of Sky endlessly for going after quote-unquote the crazy ones. And then he legitimately goes after the single craziest girl in the whole school. He cannot even talk after she flat out kills Callum. Like, come on, Riv. Like, think with your head. So Beatrix, the main villain in Fate, the Winx Saga, is supposed to represent, I guess, one or all three Trix sisters, the three witches in the original Winx series who were direct descendants of the ancestral witches that destroyed Bloom's home planet of Domino, leaving Bloom as the last remaining princess of her home planet. Yeah, those ancestral witches. Beatrix is just kind of bratty, and not at all like a fierce, bad bitch witch that all of the Trix sisters should be. It might be because I think that Sadie Soverall, the actress that plays Beatrix, looks literally like she's 12 years old to me. But besides her juvenile appearance, Beatrix just kind of lacks any real threatening qualities, in my opinion. Like, literally, the Trix in season 1 were badass. It wasn't until seasons 2 and 3 when they started teaming up with like gross bad guy characters that they became annoying. I mean, they didn't start out that way. In the first season alone, they literally stripped Bloom of her sacred dragon flame power, summoned an army of decaying creatures, returned to the school that they were expelled from to imprison the entire student body and faculty staff, cocooned the entire city of magics, and unleashed a full-out war against Althea and Red Fountain. It got intense. And if you're new here and still have never seen the original Winx Club series, consider doing that after you listen to this episode. All of the 4 kids in Ray English dubs are found on YouTube, so you're welcome. It's literally so goofy how the school's only one rule is to not go beyond the barrier, and like almost all the main characters waste no time and cross the barrier literally by the end of the episode, the first episode. And also will continue to do so throughout the entire season. So, great rule there, Feyre. Really enforced, I see. So, Bloom goes out beyond the barrier to play with her magic, which she sees some, like, sparkly magic bean that never gets addressed and we never see again. I guess, like, the woods outside of the barrier are just riddled with magical creatures that we just haven't seen or will never get to see. I don't know. So, funny enough, in the original Winx series, Bloom also uses her magic for the second time during the Althea back-to-school dance, which I think that those two parallels are that's just funny. So Bloom begins to lose control after finally figuring out what sparked her magic, which was a powerful emotion behind it. And then Aisha comes to the rescue in true token black helper character fashion. Too far. I'm sorry. I'm so sad that they've reduced Aisha to this. I really hope that they get a chance to redeem it in season 2 and give us the true Princess Aisha we deserve. But like, I digress for now, I guess. As Bloom and Aisha are swapping like sad origin stories, though we still don't get much of one from Aisha, and the scene is still more heavily focused on Bloom's backstory. They are definitely standing in the corridor that is like right above the main atrium where the party is going on. Like, I don't think that I noticed this until my probably like 3rd watch through, but yeah, it's definitely still a party happening while Aisha's just throwing around claims that Bloom's a changeling, and so like, cool. Bloom's backstory isn't as tragic to me as they probably wanted it to seem. Like, she was just a misunderstood introverted teenager who didn't get along with her mom, so she sets her mom and dad's room on fire. Seems reasonable. What? It's funny how Aisha puts together that her parents aren't her real birth parents almost immediately. I have a feeling like, sure, this wasn't the first thing that Bloom thought of, but no way had she never thought of it entirely. Like, she had to have had this thought somewhere in the back of her mind that she was adopted, or like that her parents weren't her real parents. Like, she had to have thought of it at some point. This maybe that's why like this hit her so hard, is because like maybe this was like a repressed like feeling that she was just shoving so way down deep inside that when Aisha said it, it just kind of like boop, pushes her over the edge. So again, in the original Winx series, Bloom always knew that she was adopted, but she didn't know how her parents found her until about like the middle of the first season, when Mike and Vanessa tell her that Mike, who was a firefighter, found Bloom in a burning building with like protective flame barrier around her. It was really cool. In Fate, however, Bloom is actually born to Mike and Vanessa, just somehow magically switched with their human baby who had a heart defect in the womb. Creepy, but okay. So obviously the thought of being a changeling is upsetting, to say the least, and Stella doesn't need to be an empath to know that Bloom is visibly upset and missing home and What do you know? Stella just happens to have a gateway ring. Lucky Bloom. So she can just pop back over to her parents' house in Gardenia and go see them. Oh, wait, no, she can't, because her parents still don't know that she's a fairy and at a school for fairies. And it would probably seem suspicious if she showed up less than 24 hours after arriving to her school in what they think is the Alps. It's so funny. This scene is really reminiscent of like Winx season 1 when Bloom goes home after getting just absolutely humiliated in front of basically all of Magic's by her thought to be boyfriend Brandon, but then turned out to be Prince Sky of Heraklion, who, wait for it, was also engaged. Man, it's a wild ride, Winx season 1, let me tell you. However, Bloom doesn't stay on Earth for very long in Fate. Once she gets chased around by like a burned one that followed her into the first world, which is what they call Earth. Weird, okay. Bloom drops Stella's gateway ring and the burned one kind of like absorbs it. Gross. Faradalline comes in the nick of time and saves Bloom. Bloom runs through the gateway that she, I guess, came through, and 3 of the 4 remaining Winx suite mates are standing outside waiting for her. All of them except Stella, who is clearly in Sky's bed, which stands to reason why she's not a part of Bloom's welcome back committee. Classic. And then, Bloom informs them that the burned one has Stella's ring. Of course, this bleeds over into the second episode's plot of how they're going to get Stella's ring back. This, series of events, I mean, not like the burned one, absorbing the ring and, not that, but, the whole, Stella's ring thing and, getting it back, that is a shared, similarity of the original Winx series where the Tricks actually steal Stella's ring and the Winx have to get it back. There's a lot of commonalities, and it's really cool to see, the twists and stuff that Fate has put on it. So, as far as episodes go, this one wasn't the worst. I'm really excited to dive deeper as we continue to dissect Fate. I'll leave you now with what were my initial thoughts on the first episode. I recorded my initial thoughts after each episode during my first initial watch through when Fate released. So, enjoy.
I'm sitting in my living room. These are my initial thoughts after watching episode 1, season 1, Fate the Winx Saga. Definitely different. Definitely not the fairies I grew up with, but that's okay. I hate Stella, but I feel bad for her, but she does it to herself, it seems like she plays the victim, but she's only a victim of herself. I hate how, overtly edgy they're trying to make Riven. Yeah, we get it. He's a bad boy. Ooh, he's smoking a joint. Ooh, he has a flask in the middle of the welcome party and, freaking whatever the freak. Tara almost strangling him was badass, and I loved it. That was great. It's going to be really sad when Dane and Riven hook up and then break Tara's little heart. Because I know it's going to happen. It's going to freaking happen. I really don't want Tara's weight to be a huge part of her character arc. I don't know. I just feel like that's cheap. Bloom's background is intriguing. But the coolest part is hearing all these things that I've followed for 17 years. It's real. Not real, but I don't know. It's this weird thing that only I've ever known about in my world, and now it's I'm hearing it come out of the mouth of a real life actor that I know. It's weird, right? Not weird, but it's just different. It feels like Winx Club's always been my thing, or I've only known about it. I know that it's a world renowned franchise, but it's nice. that like something that I've been following for 17 years like this, I don't know, it's kind of like reimagined. It's interesting to see how someone has taken a story that I grew up with and like used a lot of elements of it, but it's like completely different. Yeah. I hate that they're not all unique like fairy powers. I hate that they're basically like the witch fairies from Disney's Witch. Which I recently just found out, oh, good one. Which I recently just found out was also an Italian originated like story. Like it was a book series by an Italian author. Like, what? How crazy. Anyway, and that they like both came out like the same year. That's insane to me. That like wrecked my brain. So yeah, I'm gonna start episode 3 now. Nope, episode 2. Wow, I can't even think straight. Yeah, really weird, really interesting. We shall see.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of the Winx Forever podcast, consider following our social media linked in the show notes below. The Winx Forever podcast theme is the song She Makes Magic by Big Wild.